What's up, folks? Same size here. I stumbled on a BBC News interview from about 2 weeks ago with executive producer Holly Longdale and associate game director Maria Hamilton. And they basically talk about kind of the state of the Warcraft franchise and, you know, what the next years are going to look like for the game. And I thought it would be interesting just to, you know, kind of sit down and do a watch through and, you know, just kind of give my thoughts as they talk. Let's get into it. Let's take a look. Let's see, you know, what they're saying and how I feel about it. So here we go.
We've got some pretty incredible ideas on the way.
We have so many ideas.
They've always said that.
We're going to talk about 20 years of World of Warcraft. I want to know, when was the first time you played the game?
Well, I was working on a competing MMO at the time. I was working on EverQuest and heard about this World of Warcraft game coming from Blizzard. And I thought, well, fine, I'll try it. I was completely captivated. So I was in the beta and I've been playing ever since. So in 2000, it might have been 2004 early, I think. But yeah, I was hooked and just I've been playing ever since. And to have the opportunity and the gift to work on this team, you can't write that story.
And how about you, Maria?
I also was working for another studio at the time, and we were also working on an MMO. And one of the designers on our team got into the beta, and we all took turns playing and checking it out. And I was also very interested in seeing some of the improvements that were made and how it really took some of the best of the MMOs that were already out there. So I was hooked, and yeah, my husband and I started playing right away.
Just going to say, I started playing World of Warcraft right at the launch of the Burning Crusade. So it was January 2007. The game was like crack. I mean, I could not get enough of it. And I played it for about 2 years, right before the Wrath of the Lich King came out, and I had to quit. I just had to step away from the game because I was in way too deep with it. So I missed, you know, what a lot of people would say are the glory years of Warcraft, you know, for the Wrath of the Lich King. But I did come back at the tail end of Mists of Pandaria. I've been playing ever since, which I guess now is a little over 10 years, doing all kinds of content, you know, especially Mythic Plus now. So I totally get what they're saying in terms of just kind of immediately being hooked.
Now, 20 years is a long time. As you say, the game has changed a lot. I want to ask you about how you think the fan base has changed as well, in terms of what kind of people are now playing World of Warcraft and how's that different from 20 years ago?
Certainly at the time in 2004, even when we think back to how we all got internet, it was, you know, even by global standards, sort of a niche-y space to be in an MMO. And over time, you know, World of Warcraft blew that wide open and really invited a lot of players into the game. And I would say, by and large, you know, we were in our 20s, 30s for the most part. And now we're seeing, you know, as the game has gone on for 20 years, it's now cross-generational. We've got parents with kids, they're playing with their kids. I play with my stepson. And so we're now looking at how do we address, you know, all of these generations and all the various ways that our players consume game content and the players that don't play WoW. So we're constantly looking at the industry itself, and as well as our own player base, to see what is resonating with them. And we've gone through quite a few changes, particularly in the past 2 years, to start addressing that. We have better access to data, and we look at the behavior of players in general. And now we are trying to serve them, particularly those players who were underserved by, you know, our estimation. And now we are creating content for them in a very World of Warcraft way. Lots of whimsy and challenge and variety.
I think something that's important to note about this is they've talked a lot, Blizzard has talked a lot about adapting to new player behaviors. And even the same people that have been playing for the last 20 years, they're not playing the same as when they did when they were kids or when they were teenagers or whatever. A lot of what we see with Warcraft now, I think, is much more instanced and kind of drop in, drop out kind of content. So we're talking about things like Mythic Plus. Obviously, over the last 10 to 15 years, we've gotten LFR, just being able to queue into raids. And they're even looking at, with the War Within, including delves, which are going to be these kind of bite-sized 10 to 15-minute adventures, that are in service of both solo players, but also up to groups of 5, right? So their idea here is to give all sorts of different content opportunities to these players that are kind of on the spectrum of casual to hardcore. Whether that works out, I guess, remains to be seen. We have no idea how delves are really going to go once they're actually in the hands of the broader player base. Some initial reactions I've seen from, the players that are in the alpha, like Maximum and those guys, seem to say that it's maybe too casual for a more hardcore player, but who knows? I mean, we're going to see.
If I could just jump in there too, I remember back in the day that it was a pretty time-consuming thing. If you wanted to play with your friends, you spent a lot of time making sure that you were working hard to stay, current and had all the best stuff. And it was a hardcore thing to be an MMO player. You spent a lot of time. And over the years, we've increasingly made the game more accessible. It's been about making sure that everyone can play and everyone feels welcome, making it very inclusive. So now we do things like with our new Delves feature that we're adding in the War Within, we're offering these 10, 15-minute snippets of activity that you can do, when you have a little bit of time. Maybe you can't sit down and do a raid with your friends right now, but you can pop in the game, you put the kid down for a nap, or you're taking a study break and you can hop in.
I was going to say, have not watched this yet. They've said 10 to 15 minute bites and other pieces of content. So clearly that's, I think, the line that they're going for here.
And play 15 minutes, achieve something, get a good reward, and pop back and do what you're doing. So I think that's a big change for us design-wise. It's no longer a massive commitment every time you log in. It's intended to be accessible.
Something too, maybe Holly's going to talk about it, but something too, I think that's important to note is, like, when World of Warcraft first started, a lot of social media was not either a thing at all or still so much in its infancy, where people would go online and play World of Warcraft and that was a community to them, right? They were able to connect with their friends, their family members, whatever, in a way that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to do, right? So now we're in an age where everybody's connected as 24/7, basically, where we've got social media, we've got different, internet communities like Reddit, we've got Wowhead, things like that people can engage with all the time. And so, we're seeing this shift of kind of player mindset, right? Like I was talking about before, where it's gone from kind of just being in the world and spending a ton of time. Maria kind of keyed into it a minute ago of, wanting to just do the grinds and hang out with people and kind of just live in that world, where the game isn't so much that anymore as it is now just trying to do the content and just kind of getting in and getting out. We're seeing that also transition to more of a seasonal model with Warcraft. I think Blizzard has come to the realization that players aren't subscribed over the course of a full patch cycle or over the course of a full expansion, right? There's an ebb and flow to that. And so they're trying to, kind of mix and match their content to suit that more seasonal model and that more deeply engaged and then less engaged, kind of player flow.
I will say, I'm going to add to that, as much as things changed, much of it stays the same. So, and speaking particularly about World of Warcraft Classic. So in Classic, the people who want to live in that experience that does require that time and that investment and a lot more reliance socially to get things done. They are both overwhelmingly popular. From my point of view, it's a very vibrant community we work with, and they are different. Our Classic community is very different from our modern community, and to Maria's point, we had heard the feedback from the community is, they don't all have those hours to spend. And you'll see that as we go forward, like Maria said, in the features that we put in our new expansions.
I think it's totally fair to say, that a lot of players don't have the hours. And there is definitely a difference between the investment in Classic versus the investment in retail. In terms of hours spent, I did hardcore. I leveled 1 to 60 on a paladin, and it took me 227 hours or something like that to get there. And it was just terrible. Leveling a paladin in Classic is awful. But I did it, and it was a ton of fun. But it was a totally different experience from what I would do in retail. Right, retail you can level to max, within 5 to 15 hours, depending on kind of how streamlined your route is going to be. But Classic is a whole other beast, and there's definitely a different player mindset when it comes to playing Classic, and again, kind of living in that world and doing things that take a little bit longer. Whether it's traveling, obviously there's no flying outside of just flight paths, but there's just so much more kind of individual responsibility to move throughout the world and to engage with the world in a different way, and also cooperate with people in a more nuanced way. But simultaneously, right, the game is solved when it comes to true vanilla Classic, right? Like Classic era. So you also do see a lot of people playing a little bit more competitively when it comes to parses, in a raid environment. So, it's interesting that the player behavior is similar to retail in that respect, but in Classic, they're just two different worlds that they're serving players.
Modern game.
It's interesting that you mention having options for people who don't want to necessarily put as much time into it. And we're hearing a lot more about how attention is really the big thing people are trying to get. I'm wondering if you see your competitors these days quite differently, whereas in the past it might be other MMOs. Is it now things like Netflix, maybe? Is it, other streaming services? Well, what do you think?
Yes, absolutely. Some of what we are doing now, and, we are in a period of evolution where for the first time ever, we announced our next 3 expansions. We announced that last November at our BlizzCon event.
Hype as hell, by the way.
And that is part of, creating some expectations around our future, that we are here for it. This is going to take some time for this storyline to play out. And that is looking broadly and going beyond games. You mentioned Netflix. When we talk about, something, players like to have some stability in what to expect. And so revealing that was a big change for us. And again, we look everywhere in every genre. We look at mobile. We all play mobile games too. And are there elements there that are a good fit for our game? Or game modes that are session-based. So we released a game mode called Plunderstorm that was sort of a World of Warcraft version of a PvEVP BR.
Friends of mine, guildies of mine, absolutely love Plunderstorm. It's okay to me. I had fun doing it. I did not max out and become a plunder lord, but I had fun playing it. For the short times that I did. I think the mobile piece that she talks about here has been tested in Warcraft. We've seen things like the mission tables in the past that I just don't think they've really landed on what the right kind of mobile-esque experience is right for Warcraft. I don't know that they've quite nailed that down. So I don't know. I'm interested to see what they do. And also, please, I hope for the love of Azeroth that they don't do any sort of gacha mechanics, which I can't imagine they would at this point. But I think the further they stay away from the mobile space, the better, in my opinion.
And we're continuing to do that. We're really in a period of evolution and exploration right now.
And Maria, from a design point of view, has anything in the game changed to kind of address those new competitors that you might be up against?
I think our push toward accessibility and making sure that people feel welcome, trying to assure that they have interesting things to do. We've always served a very broad audience. We have different segments of our player base. There's people who really love PvP. There's people who really love battle pets. There's people who really love professions.
Do people still love battle pets? I feel like I haven't heard anybody talk about battle pets in any capacity for years. But like Warlords, I feel like was the last time I heard anybody talking about it. So I don't know. Maybe you're out there. Like, comment if you are. I don't know.
And they're happy to just go in the game and spend time doing the things that they love. And we want to make sure that, they're happy, that they're enjoying the content that we're putting in, that we're continuing to hear what they're asking for. So
also, I've heard mixed reactions on PvP in Dragonflight. So if anybody has any PvP insight, I'm exclusively PvE with maybe 1%. Like at the very end of a patch, I might dabble in like solo shuffle, which has been a great addition to the game as far as I'm concerned. But I don't know, like, are people moving out of kind of structured PvP and into solo shuffle? I don't know what the balance is like in PvP. So if anybody has any insight there, please let me know, because I'm curious if everyone still kind of loves PvP in the same way as they did a few expansions ago.
I think it's less in this case about our competitors and more about what our players are telling us that they're interested in and that they'd like to see.
And there's always pressure to grow if you can. I'm interested to know who doesn't play World of Warcraft at the moment, who you want to play, and why do you think they don't play it right now?
I think, for Warcraft, for us broadly as a franchise, we want everyone to play. We think we have a very appealing, approachable, whimsical IP that certainly serves, it's our spin on high fantasy that over 20 years has resonated with people, and we suspect it will continue to resonate.
I'm gonna interrupt really quick. Holly has said twice now, whimsy and whimsical, which there's an element of Warcraft that I think is whimsy and whimsical, but I feel like, I don't know, with Dragonflight, we've kind of moved away from overtly maybe some of the more grittiness that past expansions have had. And maybe, I mean, we're seeing with the War Within, it seems like it's gonna, kind of move the needle back in that direction from the previews that we've seen. But I'm curious, I mean, this design team now, I think, really focuses in on the whimsy piece of it. And there's so much more to Warcraft. And just as an anecdote, talking about people that don't play Warcraft now, but should, or from my personal view, totally want to, is my girlfriend. She tried World of Warcraft last year for the first time ever. She'd never really even heard much about it. But I'm a diehard, so, I managed to convince her. And she played through Dragonflight. She got to level 70. She ran through a Mirdrasil. And, she did a lot of the content very casually. Just, normal raids and normal dungeons and that kind of thing. She very much enjoyed it, but I had talked to her in the lead up to her playing about, the kind of legends of Warcraft, right? The Lich King and Illidan and all of these kind of key characters that formed the early formation of the Warcraft franchise. And when she played through Dragonflight, she was like, where was all of that? Like, she was saying, I didn't get any of the kind of gravitas that you talked about, and it's still there in certain ways, like you see Farak and wanting to burn down a Mirdrasil and all these things, but it doesn't seem to come through in the same hardcore way, I guess, for lack of a better word. So I'm curious to see if they're going to lean into that a little bit further. Another big piece of it too, I think, for a lot of players, is the subscription price. Not that I'm not going to, rag on Blizzard and say, oh, they need to drop the subscription and say it needs to be free to play. They've done a great job of maintaining that subscription price the entire time. But I think for a lot of people, especially in a free to play era, that's a big barrier to entry to get people to be consistently playing. And that's the thing that made my girlfriend stop. She said, I don't want to be playing or paying to play the game, and it's a decent chunk of change for someone that's not used to that, kind of barrier to entry.
we move forward. So we are always looking to find ways, where we can expand our audience. And yeah, ultimately that challenge will never end, because we want to share World of Warcraft with everyone around the world. Globally, especially our European audience is absolutely fundamental to our success. It's one of the reasons, we were really thrilled to be able to go back, and visit London, and spend time with creators and press. Because being global is very meaningful, and given recent announcements, it's really important, not just for World of Warcraft, but Blizzard too. We consider ourselves global.
And I want to talk about that in a sec, but I think one reason why maybe some people...
I feel like she didn't really answer the question, by the way. She kind of just said like, oh yeah, we want to get Warcraft in the hands of everybody, but how are you going to do that? I don't know. It didn't really come through.
Like the idea of an MMO or online gaming at all, and this isn't a World of Warcraft specific thing, is, it potentially being an intimidating or toxic place. And I'm wondering, are there any ways that World of Warcraft in particular is trying to address that, change that? And do you have concerns are things going in the right direction, basically?
So, any online experience runs the risk of encountering, someone who's having a bad day. And we know there are people that like to make other people unhappy. We do have a lot of functionality in the game that allows you to block people, so that you don't need to interact with them. You can opt to ignore them entirely. We also have good reporting structure and good methods of watching for problematic players, toxic players. That's not to say that...
How often does reporting actually work? Do people get banned if they're not completely mass reported? I don't know.
There's always cases where somebody manages to be annoying, but we also have some very, very welcoming players. We have the ability for players to opt in to help others. They have to have played the game for a certain amount of time and reach certain achievements. But then
I do that, by the way, and it is genuinely gratifying to help new players, especially Wave to Goroth, or whatever, the ogre and the Forbidden Reach. The amount of people that put in the newcomer chat, they just type Wave to Gorgoroth or whatever, is hilarious. And I'm always like, you got to type / blah blah blah, and they so many people just don't get it. Which is also funny, because / commands are, kind of this relic of the old era of games, and new players especially they don't have the grasp on that quite yet. So it's sometimes pretty fun.
Be part of a channel where they can answer questions, and we have a tremendous number of players that opt to do that enjoy doing that want to help. We've also tried to make our new player experience as friendly as possible and accessible. See, on
this point though, accessibility, sure. I'm not so sure that it's the best new player experience. And this is, again, something that my girlfriend mentioned when she started playing. You're put into the Forbidden Reach, and at the time you were immediately then thrown into Battle for Azeroth and starting this campaign with, she played Alliance, so it was with Jaina, and she's like, I don't know what is going on or why I need to care about any of these characters. And she made it halfway through BFA before she hit level 60, and then she immediately was taken to the Dragon Isles, because that's just what you do. You don't level up anymore. And so she had such whiplash and was like, I just don't even know like what is happening. And I had to explain to her. I was like, yeah, so the game just isn't really suited to a cohesive kind of story until you're in the main expansion, that's current. And I think for a lot of new players that don't have somebody else explaining that to them, it's chaos. It's a total jumbled mess. And I would love for them to, they're going to be using Dragonflight as the new player experience. So you'll go Forbidden Reach into Dragonflight. So maybe that'll help alleviate it. I'm sure it will, because it's less heavy-handed maybe as something like a BFA is in terms of how deep the story goes. But yeah, I'll be curious to hear thoughts from any new players too, if they had a similar kind of experience of whiplash with that.
Kind of separate those new players we put them in their own area with other new players to start and teach them about the mechanics, so they don't
Somewhat.
immediately get dumped into the game and just left to the mercy of whatever's around them. So we give them some time to learn before we bring them into their capital city, and make sure that they've had an opportunity to enjoy the game for a bit before necessarily encountering an experienced player who, for whatever reason, as I said, might have a bad day or something. The other nice thing is that the core of the game is not PvP. It's PvE. It's cooperative.
Rip PvPers.
So I think when you're in a PvP environment, there tends to be a fair bit of trash talk and that kind of side of things. And in our game, that's opt-in. You have to choose to PvP. You have to choose to opt into that environment. So I think we've tried really hard to keep things pleasant. It's not to say we don't have more work to do. There's always more work to do. But I think as we look at the design and we look at ways to reduce that online toxicity, this is a subject we talk about and consider.
Big rip PvPers. She didn't even talk about PvE. Okay, so this is a big point too, because I push Mythic Plus. I've been in the past top 100 for my class on NA, which I'm not, that's not a huge brag. I'm sure there are tons of people that have done that. But, the amount of toxicity that's in Mythic Plus too, or even Raid, can be hugely high. Not knowing the best route, or missing a kick, or failing a boss mechanic. I think there's a ton of pressure on people in those environments too. I see that. I've got a couple of friends that are mild Mythic Plus players, where they aren't super invested in that as an end game pillar. They just do it for fun. They'll do it with me. We'll do, I guess in the new system, we'd be doing like somewhere between like 2s to 5s. And still it's a high pressure environment for people that aren't familiar with the kind of core mechanics of the dungeons and things that you need to do. And I think because there's a timer on it, and because the rewards are tied to that, people can get very frustrated when you're not kind of good enough to be doing that kind of content, in a better way, right? Using your class's utility and doing all the things that, make for a smooth dungeon run. And so I'm surprised to see that she doesn't address that side of it. She's really painting PvE in a very positive light, and really just kind of dunking on PvPers, which, I mean, sure, there's tons of trash talk, but I feel like just as much, if not more, trash talk in PvE than there is PvP. But again, shout out PvPers. I don't know if you're in the chat and you can comment about your experience on that.
I will say that
he looked like he was thinking that same thing.
Particularly for me, it's very important to create safe spaces in our game. And we have people on the team who are dedicated to exploring that. We look at other games and other places where that does exist, but that's very much a focus for our future, as is the approachability of the game. To your point, 20 years in, the game can be overwhelming. Yeah. And we have a live team now, and the team is going to be focused on that going forward. How do we make it, fun, accessible, and not feeling like you're, getting drowned by 20 years of content, in the first 20 minutes, hour that you play. But it's a focus for our future.
That hits exactly on what I was talking about, I think. So I don't know, maybe they have a new idea for a new player experience. I guess we'll see.
Now, of course, the big change is you're now part of the Microsoft family, if that's not too glib to say.
Very curious to see what they say about this. This was a couple of weeks ago. Obviously, Xbox has taken a pretty big reputation hit over this past week with the shutdown of several Bethesda studios, including Tango Gameworks, who made Hi-Fi Rush. Super, super curious to hear your thoughts on this. I don't know that there's been enough time for them to really kind of be integrated to the Microsoft portfolio in a meaningful way for that to impact development or anything. But yeah, I don't know. Let's see.
But part of Microsoft, has it changed the roadmap, what's coming up, or any way that we can expect to see World of Warcraft operating?
So far, no. We're still getting to know each other a bit. One of the really cool things that happened or has happened in the time we've been together is being able to talk with some of the other studios. So we had a meeting with the Elder Scrolls Online team to talk about, their experiences and what's happening with their game and what's working for them, and learning from them, as well as with the Minecraft team.
I didn't even think about the fact that Microsoft has 2 MMOs under its belt right now with Elder Scrolls Online and with World of Warcraft. That's super interesting. I wonder, I don't know. I'm curious. Well, I guess Delves, this is just a side note. I've played ESO too, and ESO has Delves. Doesn't seem like they're quite the same as what's going to be implemented in Warcraft. And I'm sure that was a previous, kind of development decision before the acquisition. But I wonder, there's probably some opportunities for inspiration between the two, and some knowledge sharing there. Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't even think about that.
So it's very rare, special benefit of being part of a team or Xbox where there's so many studios that we can share knowledge. We're really excited about that. But so far, our goal is to focus on, the World Soul Saga, getting more within out the door to hopefully players who will have a lot of fun. And then with Classic as well, we've got Classic Cataclysm right around the corner.
Does anyone really want Classic Cataclysm? I know it's out now, and I've got one friend who's playing it, but I feel like Cata is kind of the end of the Classic era, but maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I'm expecting that Blizzard's going to do a progressive server, structure of, it's run through every expansion, right? I cannot imagine that MoP is not going to be a Classic expansion next, to follow Cataclysm. I just wonder when that's going to stop. Are we going to be seeing Classic Shadowlands? God, I hope not. I don't know. We'll see.
We've got their full support to do everything we've got to do to deliver for our audience.
A fun example is for our arachnophobia mode that we were putting in. We had access to Microsoft's data for all their other games, so we could look into what solutions other games used before we decided on our solution.
Shout out arachnophobes.
You're talking to other studios. Does this also potentially mean maybe some crossovers in the future? Some things people might not have expected?
I have nothing to announce right now. We're all optimistic. Who knows?
Bring Master Chief into Azeroth. Let's just see it. And Master Chief and Doomguy would punt Farak off the planet. That would be hilarious to see.
Early days.
Would you want to see it though, like in a dream world?
It's such a broad question. It's an interesting thing to think about, for sure.
Fair enough. Early days.
That was not the reaction I was anticipating. That did not scream excitement to me about the accessibility or access to Microsoft's IPs. That's interesting. I don't know.
Yeah.
20 years is a lot of history. Not necessarily everything will have been what you would have done if you were in charge at the time. I'm wondering,
Shadowlands.
Is there anything from World of Warcraft's
20-year
history where if you could cast a spell now and remove it from history, you would do that?
Oh, Lord.
Shadowlands.
I'm not sure. Honestly, I feel
Shadowlands.
Everything the game has achieved.
Shadowlands.
It's all got benefits in some way. I think one of the biggest learnings that we've had was gaps in content for an MMO is not good. And we saw that in particular with Shadowlands. And that was a transition, to work from home during COVID, very challenging for the team. And we saw the effect of that on the player base with pretty significant gaps in releases. And our reaction to that was, we put out content about every 8 weeks now.
And it's not even just the content. I mean, the content drought is a huge piece of that, but also just so many oppressive systems in Shadowlands, between the covenant locking, the requirement to be running Torghast for legendary dust, soul dust and soul ash or whatever. just so many things that just could weigh on players, and so immediately just being able to, if you were a few weeks behind, it was just awful to have to play any of Shadowlands, honestly.
And that's sort of, the
except the dungeons were better than Dragonflight, and I'm going to stand by that.
Success we've had in the past year or so. All of our charts and graphs for World of Warcraft have never looked like they do now. So I think we're a pretty humble team by and large, and we know that did not work well, and we are always looking to improve in all areas.
I think that humility is a recent development because of Shadowlands. I think seeing how many subscribers were dropping and how many people were just hard exiting the game made them humble. I think for the last 6 years or so, barring Dragonflight, pre-Dragonflight, the last 6 years of the WoW team have been, I would say, pretty arrogant, pretty rooted in their design decisions, and wanting to kind of just force that until, I would say, kind of a breaking point, right? Where in the very last patch of the expansion, we're talking about the 8.3s, the 7.35s, where, they finally just let things go loose. And same with the Shadowlands too, right? Removing the Covenant restrictions, and letting people just kind of play how they want. They have started very rigidly and then expanded that at the end of an expansion, which I'm very happy to see with Dragonflight, that they didn't have, kind of this overarching system that needed to have the ripcord pulled, as we used to say in Shadowlands. So I think the humility is newfound, but I appreciate it. It's been good. I want to see them now kind of dial up what they can do with the game now that they've set the foundation with Dragonflight.
But Shadowlands in and of itself was a very complex, beautiful expansion. It's just we didn't have enough of it, and so
beautiful for zones. Beautiful for zones. That's about all I'll say.
With their current expansion with Dragonflight and Into War Within, we're targeting 8 weeks. Every 8 weeks, we have content updates to be able to serve our audience in the various ways they play. So part of that too is we're not just doing, the end game hardcore content, but we are looking at all the ways our players play to invite them back, every 8 weeks. And so far, it's doing really well.
I'll let Maria talk. Let's hear what she has to say.
Wave my magic wand and make an adjustment. I think back when we were making the game, back in those days, I think representation wasn't always the best. I think the image of some of our character races might not be entirely wonderful, with the lens of today. At the time, different lens. So I think I'd probably wave my magic wand there and see if I could improve on that. In the recent years, we've had the benefit of lectures and experts coming to speak to us about subjects before we build content that might be offensive to other groups.
I wonder if there's a specific example that she has in mind about this, because certainly there was an era, right, of games where they were much more geared toward a male audience, certainly. But I'm curious to know if she has specific examples of what that, kind of representation would be. Or if anyone, that watches this, if you have examples of your own that you want to throw in the comments, feel free. I could probably come up with a couple, but I'm just curious to know.
And that has been wonderful for the team. It really helps the artists and the designers. So I think if I did that would be
There's one thing I want to just jump back to Holly's point about content every 8 weeks and not necessarily only serving kind of the hardcore end of the player base when it comes to, Mythic Plus and raids and I guess PvP. Dragonflight, I felt like, had a lot of samey content. A lot of world content that was kind of just a Timeless Isle-esque, between the Forbidden Reach, between Zarelek Caverns, and even like the Super Bloom, it's all kind of just stuff, and it's forgotten as quickly as it's implemented. And I think I would love to see, they've talked so much about evergreen content, with setting the foundation of Dragonflight. Everything is going to be evergreen. They're going to be building on these evergreen systems. And they're also not utilizing zones like the Forbidden Reach or, Zarelek Caverns, just to name those two examples, much further than their own patch lifetime. If that, I mean, in some cases, the zones are abandoned before even the patch is over. And so I'd be curious to see a shakeup of that formula, and move away from just rare hunting around a zone, and doing some whatever MacGuffin kind of system you need to do for that given patch or that zone, like the vaults, in the Forbidden Reach, fun as they are. I mean, it's not really content that lives beyond that short window. And yeah, I would just be curious, and maybe Delves is their answer for that, of something that lives on a little bit longer than just those kinds of isles that get added basically to the expansion.
What are you most excited about for the next 20 years of World of Warcraft?
We talk about it a lot, and to be able to sort of unleash this boundless creativity. And when I say, we really do want to find ways to have everyone play World of Warcraft, and we've got some pretty incredible ideas on the way that are really focused around the community itself. So we certainly do well creating content we love ourselves, but we're looking a lot farther, and a lot farther ahead to feel what is it going to be like to be a citizen of Azeroth in our world, and what could that mean for any type of player, and that's sort of one of our guiding principles right now. And super excited, as part of Microsoft, we feel like there's some pretty boundless potential.
Let's hope so.
Way.
I would say that we just have so many stories to tell, and it's just been such a joy to have opportunity to do that. And the idea of having, 20 more years to do that is so exciting. I mean, we have so many ideas. The team is so excited. And we just can't wait to share those stories.
In another interview, Maria did mention that she already knows what the ending of The Last Titan is, which I can't imagine that, everybody at Blizzard doesn't know the ending of The Last Titan. I wonder what they're thinking next and what, comes for the next 20 years of Warcraft, because Chris Metzen even said it on the stage at BlizzCon of, we've got the World Soul Saga, who knows how long that's going to last, right? Or the expansion is going to be 18 months, instead of the 2+ years that we've seen in the past. They've talked about that for a long time. Let's see if they can execute that. I don't know. But Chris Metzen said, for setting us for the future of Warcraft, not just World of Warcraft. So I'm curious, is the World Soul, I'm certain that the World Soul Saga is not going to end World of Warcraft, but what is it going to give way to? I would really love to know. And I think it's too early to tell, but I am very interested in what they're cooking up.
So I think that's the exciting part for me is just, I've played the game since it was in beta, and I love the world, and so the opportunity to make the stories for the world over the next 20 years is
shout
really
out Halifal.
thrilling.
Looks sick.
So more than enough stories to fill 20 years.
Easily.
Yeah, easily.
It just kind of ends. So interesting. Very interesting interview. It's good to see kind of what they're cooking up and what they think, kind of the current state of the game is. And, I guess we'll see what happens in the War Within. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to be, total degen mode for the launch of that expansion, and onward, I'm sure. I'm super hyped for it. I can't wait. I've been watching all kinds of content around it. So let's see what they cook up. Let's see if it pans out the way that they're hoping. let me know what you guys think in the comments. I would be very interested on your perspective of what they talked about, what I talked about, whatever. Shout out. Just let me know.